of weeks ago, the Sunday school had a project that they needed to make some Jesus glasses. And so our grandson, Eddie, he made a special pair of glasses. Now, for those people who might not fully understand why he has such special glasses, is he wanted to make some GP glasses, or grandpop glasses, because he is very used to his grandfather wearing multiple glasses at the same time. It's a very special look. Stephen wears 2 or 3 glasses, and depending on what he's trying to read, he might have both of them on, looking through them, or he has them stacked on top of each other. I fear that the child is permanently damaged because of it. But, you know, we see things through the lens in which we have been taught and we are familiar. So for Eddie, when you can wear multiple glasses at the same time, and maybe Jesus did the same thing. Will you pray with me, please? Dear God, I just ask you to just open our eyes so that we are not blind to the many things that you have before us. Amen. So we are wired, according to psychology today, to see any given situation through the lens in which we have been wired to see it. That all the things that have happened to us since the beginning of our birth are the things that kind of frame the way that we view anything. And so therefore, in some way, none of us sees clearly. According to the same article, it says that rarely do we see more than our mind will allow us. That actually our brain is fixed on only the familiar, and that it's what's comfortable for us. In other words, our brains are wired to be black and white, linear, one way. Now, if we take the upcoming election, for example, we can see the faults of those of whom we disagree with. And we probably are unable to see all the faults of those to whom we agree. Our brain doesn't want us to move into the gray scale, to consider the other things that are available, and determine whether the negative things in which we hear about this candidate, if they might be true, if they might be supported by some facts. You know, it's actually kind of useless for us to try to convince someone that what they feel is false. Because no matter how hard we try to convince someone that they are wrong, their brain is keep telling them that they are right. The brain works against the facts. Our gospel lesson today is a long and complicated passage. I didn't make Ben read the whole thing. It's an encounter with Jesus. It is a healing. It's about a man who was born blind, but like most of John's gospel, he takes a very simple story and he uses it as an occasion to make a much larger point. It's about Jesus challenging us to think about the people in the story. It's about Jesus who is coming against our linear black and white thinking and pushing us to consider more than what we believe are the facts in the story. Now, depending on who you are in this story, you view the blind man through your own lens of experience. For the man, we don't even know his name. He has spent an entire lifetime on the outside of the community. He was born blind, and therefore he has lived in darkness. And that darkness has created problems for him. And I believe that probably one of those problems is loneliness. And And so when Jesus encounters him on that day, he is spending his days begging to exist. This blind man cannot see. And that's what the perspective of his donors are when they come across him. You know, there is just not this one man begging on the street corner right in front of the temple, but there are many people that are there. And this man does not have the advantage of seeing who's coming, who is it worth to say something to, and who are the ones who always just ignore her. And so what he has to do is he has to listen carefully. He has to listen to the sounds of people passing by, and on that day, the best that he hoped for was that he would hear someone stop and that they would give him a bit of change that would allow him to exist for the next day. Now, if you're looking through the lens of the townspeople, these townspeople have passed this blind beggar every day. He has blended in with all the others who are far less fortunate than they are. These folks saw this man as a nuisance, and often they want to avoid him. Those people is what he has become labeled, and people wanted to avoid seeing him. And so when they came to that part of the temple where there were all the beggars, likely they put down their heads and crossed the road there so they didn't have to be bothered. It's interesting because they never really looked at the man. They never took time to really consider who he was as a person. Later in the story, it tells us that the neighbors were not even sure if the cured man was this same man. The man who grew up among them, the man who stood outside their town each and every day. A famous American author once wrote that the worst sin toward our fellow creatures is not to hate them, but to be indifferent to them. As a townsperson, they were indifferent to this blind man. Now, if you were one of Jesus' disciples, you were like the other Jews that were hustling and bustling in that area, and you had business in the temple. And so this blind man, this man who is standing there begging, what he becomes is a theological discussion for you. He brings up some questions that are kind of burning in your brain, and so they asked Jesus, they said, who sinned? They encounter this man, they don't reach into their pockets and give him some change, they don't ask his name, but instead they don't even acknowledge him. They are looking not at this man as a person, but as a puzzle. The question they're bringing up of who is sinning is because at that time, it was widely regarded that if one had a disability of some kind, that it had to do with sin. And this man who has been blind since birth, they want to know, is he blind because of a sin that he committed? Or is it something that his parents committed? This man is just a riddle to them. In the same way, the Pharisees, the teachers, the priest, the leaders in that community, they had their own lens for this man. They had already judged him, and they had determined he was a sinner, and actually he got what he deserved. Why should they show charity to someone who God was obviously punishing? They believed that possibly this man had even committed some kind of sin before he was born, something that we have a hard time conceiving today. But I don't think we have a hard time conceiving the idea that sometimes we judge situations from the outside, really having no understanding of what is really happening. The Pharisees were not given all the facts. Actually, why did they need them? They were against Jesus on this matter because they really wondered why Jesus would waste his time on this man. And then when Jesus healed this man, it became not an issue of who is Jesus and how did he get this power to heal this man, but instead the question became, are you really the man who stood in the corner? Are you really that person who was blind before? And it became about the character of this man once again. And then they used it as an opportunity to pick up another argument. It's actually a technique we all use. I think we've all found ourselves at one point, and I know that this happens most often when I am in an argument with my beloved, is the fact that you are arguing about point A over here, and when you feel like you're not winning that argument, then the best idea is to change topics and argue about something that you can prove that they're wrong at, right? Yes. I can't win this one, so let's just forget this and let's move over here. And that's exactly what the Pharisees are doing that day. We can't win this argument about this man, so you know what, Jesus? You are wrong. Because today is the Sabbath, and you shouldn't be healing people on the Sabbath, and we can nail you on this one. And then we look through the lens of Jesus. And Jesus sees this man, and he immediately has compassion for him. He immediately knows this man and knows his grief and his loneliness, and he has compassion for his situation. What happens is this man does not go up to Jesus and ask him for a miracle, but the text tells us that Jesus sees him. In the midst of all the confusion outside of the temple and all the beggars, Jesus sees this man. And immediately, he sees him as a person. He takes notice of him, and his response is one of love. Jesus turns his attention to the blind man, and he spits on the ground, and he makes some mud, and he places it on his eyes. Now you have to notice that this man was not even asking to be healed. He just wanted some change. But God's love and God's provision and God's care was there for him before he even asked. Jesus sees the man, just as Jesus sees each and every one of us. And he knows the condition of our heart. And he knows where we are broken and hurting. He knows where we have given up and the world has given up on us. And he has not given up. Jesus knows that we as humanity are often in the dark. But not just the darkness caused by blindness, but instead also the darkness caused by the lack of love and compassion that we receive from those around us. So I ask you, where are you this morning in this story? What lens are you looking at the world? So often we do not see as God sees. And we often have a blindness to the world around us. Too often we assume that we know God's decision or God's judgment. And so therefore we reject those who are around us. We reject those who are struggling. A lot of it happens because from the time of our youth we are told to be careful, to insulate ourselves from those bad people. Not hang out with the bad crowd, not get involved in things that could cause us to be hurt or to be broken. And to realize that we can't help them and if they can't help themselves. Instead, we should learn to open ourselves up in love and compassion. That we're not called to be the healers, it's Jesus who actually does the healing, but we are called to open that door of light so Jesus can come into the places that are dark. Or maybe we are that blind man. Maybe we are the one who is hurting and in pain and isolated and in darkness. And Jesus wants us to be healed of our blindness. When Jesus comes to us, he allows us to see things like we had never seen them before. Can you imagine being blind your whole life, never seeing anything, and then your eyes being opened and seeing all the world around you? When I was little, I was in kindergarten. I had a friend, and I don't know why, but I was always annoyed at my friend at the way he would color pictures. Now, my mother said that he was a boy, and boys don't care as much about coloring pictures as girls, but I just didn't like the fact that it seemed like he would just scribble in the lines, and he didn't take the same kind of care in coloring as I did. And he always made everything look like it was mushed together. And then my friend got glasses, and his picture coloring changed. I guess he never could see things as any different than all mushed together. And when he could see things, then he could color them in a way that was much more acceptable to me. But can you imagine your whole life never seeing things? I remember him saying that he was really intrigued about the fact that trees had leaves on them. Because when he saw the trees, they looked like just a big mass of green. What do our eyes need to be opened? How are we seeing things as a big mush when God has brought such beauty and clarity to them? Jesus gives each of us glasses. He gives us eyes to see those who are in need around us, those who are physically and mentally and spiritually broken. He gives us direction so we're not stuck thinking in our same black and white ways, but instead we can have a full range of color in our life. And Jesus gives us the opportunity to hope for the world, to hope in a way that most people are afraid to hope. Jesus is the light of the world, so that all of us who are blinded by our own brokenness, that we have the opportunity to see, to ask for forgiveness, to love God, and to love one another, and to express that love with each and every person that we meet. Each day, we will will encounter those who are blind. And I tell you, most of those days, we will be the ones that are blind. And so we need to put on our Jesus glasses to open up the world in a way so that we can see what God sees. Thanks be to God.